Some devastating news for Donald Trump in a state that's been otherwise very kind to him, and that's Ohio. But that kindness seems to be waning. Listen to the results from these exit polls in Ohio from Republican primary voters. 22% of Ohio GOP primary voters would be dissatisfied with Trump as the nominee. 24% say he lacks the temperament to serve effectively. 29% say he wouldn't be fit for office if convicted of a crime. And here's the kicker. 19% say they wouldn't support Trump in November, with 11% of that number preferring Biden and 8% saying they wouldn't vote for either. Nearly 20% of not just primary voters, but Trump's own base voters promised not to vote for him in November. If that is not a warning sign for Trump and his campaign, nothing is. And let's be clear, this isn't a one-off. It is a recurring theme in state after state after state. Think about his margins in recent contests. 51% in Iowa, 54% in New Hampshire, 60% in South Carolina, 33% in DC, 68% in Michigan, 46% in Vermont. None of these are runaway wins for the guy, and in fact, some are even losses. All of which is further underscored by the fact that Joe Biden is winning his primary contest almost exclusively with results in the 90s. Which is not to say that Trump was ever in danger of losing the primary. In fact, both Trump and Biden already wrapped up their respective parties' nominations, but it's how Trump wrapped up the nomination that's exposing some serious problems for the Republican nominee. Not only does his loss highlight Trump's pattern of weakness within his own base, not only does it undermine his perceived strength that he's some master politician who can't stop winning, but most importantly, Nikki Haley successfully identified thousands upon thousands of Republican voters that the Biden campaign can flip. She basically left the Democrats a blueprint of exactly what persuadable voters are out there, and I'm sure the Biden campaign wasted exactly zero time in targeting them. In fact, in my latest episode of Inside the Right with Tim Miller, he explained that even Biden's State of the Union speech seemed scientifically engineered to appeal to exactly those voters.
I thought the more interesting thing, rather than the vigor, was the degree to which they were intentionally trying to talk to the Nikki Haley voter and to my people, like the former Republican types. I mean, there was a little bit of trying to talk to the left. Of course, they did abortion. They talked about adding the being able to get the aid into Gaza, right, and how they're changing the policies on that. So there was some talking to the left, but man, there was a big focus at the top of the speech. We're going to talk about Ukraine. We're going to talk about attacking Putin. I will not bow down to Putin. That was a big subtweet at Trump, right? I will not bow down, Biden says. Then he quotes Reagan, right? Then you get into January 6th and talk about, the defense of democracy. Later in the speech, I think you start talking about NATO, some of these other issues. He mentioned increase in police funding, right? It seemed to me like it was very yeah, exactly. And then the border funding, and mentioning James Langford, and cutting James Langford, who's the conservative Oklahoma senator who's in the crowd, while his colleagues are like booing Joe about saying that, hey, we're going to fund the border more, and saying that's not true. And Langford is mouthing, the TV cameras catch him mouthing that is true, right? So, boy, I thought that was just extremely intentional last night. I thought it was smart. He's going to have to keep doing it. It's not just a one-off, right? Because I think that there's some folks, obviously like myself and some others, that already made the switch, moved over to Biden, but there's more meat on that bone. There are more people. I know them. We talk to them in the focus groups for the Bulwark. I have some of them in my life who voted for Trump, and then January 6th happened, and they were off the train, and then now it gets further away from January 6th. They start to want to go back to the team they've always been on, and so you got to keep talking to them, keep messaging to them, and I thought that last night was very strong on hitting that audience. And so I think that if that issue set, getting out there and having Biden speak about it himself, but we're going to have to recruit, and this is something that some of my colleagues at the Bulwark are doing, going to have to recruit other people that have credibility with this audience, and so at the convention, he's going to have big Republican names, people that worked for him, people that worked in the administration, the Cassidy Hutchinsons of the world, the John Kellys, coming out and saying, hey, this time, this guy, we can trust Biden. We can. Biden it's too risky to go with Trump. I think that kind of combination is what's going to work for Biden, but it has to be surround sound. It has to be consistent. All of these people, they're like, deep in their hearts, they're Republicans, and so you know what I mean. And so you have to keep reminding them, keep nudging them, and I think it's doable. I think it's gettable. You saw it in these primaries, which we've been talking about. There is a subset of people, but that's why they're swing voters. You're going to have to work them over, and they're going to have some views that are a little bit not great.
And by the way, if you needed an indication of what those voters are like, Here's a montage put together by Republican voters against Trump.
I'm a former Trump voter.
I voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020.
In 2020, I voted for Trump again.
I will never support Donald Trump.
I will not vote for him in 2024.
He's got so much baggage.
Trump is the biggest threat to our democracy.
He kept denying.
And he lost the election.
Donald Trump was responsible for the violence on January 6th.
He could have prevented it.
Trump talking about retribution.
Retribution and going after people is disrespect of our military.
The military people that he's disgraced.
91
criminal felonies.
4 different indictments.
He mishandled classified documents.
Taking documents.
Now his desire to do away with NATO.
Donald Trump talks about abandoning Ukraine.
He said he'll be a dictator on day one.
If he's going to be a dictator on day one, he's going to be a dictator, period.
That kind of stuff scares me.
Absolutely scares me.
A second Trump term would be worse than the first.
A second term for Trump
Would be far more extreme.
It is dangerous, outright dangerous.
I cannot support Donald Trump again.
I'd never vote for him again.
He'll never get my vote, ever, ever.
In other words, despite the constant coverage of Trump supporters fawning over their God King in some diner somewhere that gives the impression that he's invincible, clearly that's not the case, as evidenced by looking at these primaries in state after state, or simply listening to the voters themselves. With that said, here's the usual caveat, and it's an important one. Ignore the primary results and ignore the polls. We should always act as if Donald Trump is up by 90 points. That means we keep organizing, we keep working on our circles of people, we keep spreading good information about what this administration has done that the media refuses to cover. And we don't get complacent because we see a good poll, and we don't give up in despair because we see a bad poll. That's all noise. The work we do between now and November is all that matters. Which begs the question, why even cover these primary contests? And the answer is easy, because it's telling us an important message, that Donald Trump is vulnerable and that we can win. Again, that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, because it's not, and it's going to require work and patience. But even Republican primary base voters are broadcasting that Donald Trump is in trouble. So our job is to do whatever we can to put together a coalition of Democrats and independents and pro-democracy Republicans who recognize the abject danger posed by this guy. This isn't to make you complacent, it is to let you know that it's possible, that it's within our grasp. So again, find your circles, the 1 or 2 or 3 people in your lives who don't vote, who aren't interested in politics, who are ill-informed about what's going on, and make them your responsibility heading into November. Here's my usual pitch, and you may have heard it before, but I firmly believe in the power of repetition. Joe Biden beat Donald Trump by only 2 votes per precinct in 2020 in the state of Wisconsin. That's it. 2 votes per precinct was the difference between a Biden win and a Trump win in the tipping point state, which should serve to underscore the impact that you bringing out only 2 or 3 voters who wouldn't otherwise have voted in this election would otherwise have. It might feel small, but the margins in these elections are small. Right now, politics is a game of inches, so please make sure to do your part and help Joe Biden and the Democrats gain every inch we can get, if for nothing else than the preservation of democracy itself. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to the channel and do your part to help grow the progressive media ecosystem. I don't do sponsorships or paid ads, I won't ask for money, but just subscribing to this channel goes a really long way, and it helps get the message out to more people. The subscribe button is right here on the screen. You can also subscribe to my Spanish language channel, which I made to reach those crucial Spanish-speaking voters. That link is on the screen too. And finally, if you want to listen to my audio podcast, you can follow that link as well. Thanks so much for watching.